2026 AP exam question breakdown. I'm going on to the LEQs now. All right. I'm just going to look at these and be like, okay, these are my gut instincts of what kinds of things you would talk about. Number 2, in the period circa 1200 to 1600, technological innovations, migration of peoples, and the expansion and contraction of religions intensified military conflicts and resulted in numerous wars of conflicts. Develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which military conflicts affected state building in Afro-Eurasia during the 1200 to the period 1200 to 1600. Afro-Eurasia. Okay. Military conflicts affected state building. This encompasses all of our gunpowder empires. So if you wanted to talk about the Mughal Empire taking over areas in India and then a little bit further north of India, expanding across India, you could do that. If you wanted to talk about the Ottomans expanding and taking over what was the Byzantine Empire and then expanding out into northern Africa and all that, you could do that. You could talk. I mean, dude, the Mongols. This is where they're doing things differently, and I'm not against it, but it's different. And I think every AP World History teacher, I'm editorializing again, but like every AP World History teacher needs to take this into account. This is not the way it used to be. The time period opens up so many more doors to what it used to be. It used to be more narrow. Now you can talk about the Ottoman Empire, you can talk about the Mughals, you can talk about the Mongols, all in the same thing. That just, it wasn't the way it used to be. You could definitely talk about the Mongols affecting, using military techniques to expand their state, to expand their empires. That would totally get credit for this. Now, what about a counter argument for this, or something, you'd like to have something that's like opposite? Develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which military conflicts affected state building in Afro-Eurasia. So was there something else that affected state building? How about religion? How about the spread of religion? How about the conflict between Sunni and Shia Islam, between like the Safavid Empire, which was Shia Islam, and then they were kind of buttressed in between the Ottomans and the Mughals, who were both identified with Sunni Islam. You could definitely do that. How about state building being impacted or facilitated by trade? Like the Mongols became enriched through the taxation and the facilitation of trade on the Silk Road. You could do that and get credit for that. Yeah, lots you could say there. Let's go to number 3. In the period circa 1600 to 1900, demographic, economic, and political factors led to large-scale migrations of people both within and across states, regions, and continents, including voluntary and involuntary migration flows. Develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which migration of people in the period circa 1600 to 1900 led to social and/or cultural change. Okay. Number 1, Atlantic slave trade. Okay. That would be your involuntary migration flow. How did the Atlantic slave trade lead to social or cultural change? Okay. You had new religious beliefs kind of created, such as voodoo. You had the new cultural practices created, like capoeira, which is that martial art dance kind of thing, formed mostly in the Caribbean and South America. Um, you have, when you talk about social, you have new social hierarchies created by the migration of Europeans into the Americas. Um, and so you have, you could get into the Casta paintings and the Casta system with the Spanish and how obsessed they were with where people were born, who your parents were, the mom, the dad, all this stuff. They had all this hierarchy system, very complex, very kind of strange when you look at it today. But that definitely happened. Um, those are all things that happened in the New World. Okay, there's no geographic parameter for this. Okay, so evaluate the extent to which the migration of people in the period circa 1600 to 1900 led to social or cultural change. Can we go back to Africa? What happened in Africa when all those people were involuntarily forced to migrate? Especially, that was a lot of the male population of Africa was forced to leave. Um, that very much disrupted familial structures in Africa, and it also takes a lot of workers, leaders, contributors to society out of Africa. This is very damaging to that society. That is in effect of the migration of people in Africa during that time. This is also a result of the Atlantic slave trade. Um, um, we go all the way to 1900, so we can definitely talk about that term that they call the Caucasian tsunami, which would be the migration of all kinds of people from Europe into North America, um, and the blending of people that was created. That's often referred to as the melting pot of America, bringing all those European cultural things and new people, new languages, all that kind of stuff into America. The same thing happens on the west coast of of America, with a lot of people originally from China migrating for work in the west coast of America, from China and from Japan. Um, all those arrows, Indian people from India going to um, Africa, like southern Africa, uh, and also in Southeast Asia, bringing their culture and beliefs with them. That could all be talked about. Um, yeah, there's a lot there. All right, 4. During the 20th century, individuals, groups, and states organized anti war movements, created international organizations, and adopted peacemaking policies in order to further peace and avoid future conflicts. Develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which efforts to promote peace and/or avoid international conflict during the 20th century were successful. Okay, I feel like gut instinct here. What they The easiest path would be talking about how the League of Nations was formed after World War One. That was not successful for various reasons. One of the main reasons is America did not join the League of Nations, even though it was kind of an American idea. The American Congress did not approve that, and the Americans didn't join. The League of Nations was very ineffective in maintaining peace, because basically it was an international organization that just like had no authority, and no one, people like just didn't listen. So that was ineffective. And then after World War One, after World War Two, the United Nations was formed along the similar lines, and so they all tried to promote peace and try to solve things through diplomatic means instead of through war. The United Nations, people have a lot of opinions about that. It's had varying degrees of success, but ultimately, I believe you could say it has promoted peace, for sure, throughout the uh, the 20th century. Develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which efforts to promote peace and/or avoid international conflict during the 20th century were successful. What else could we talk about? international organizations. You know, did you talk about NATO and the Warsaw Pact? I don't know. I don't know how they're going how that's going to be assessed, because those ultimately were military pacts. They were military organizations. Now, did they promote peace? The cold, like they attempted to try to band together to uh, avoid conflict, or at least like prepare for conflict. There was no outright battles between uh, the Cold War, two sides of the Cold War, but there definitely was lots of death that were caused by the entanglements of the Cold War. So you could say, oh, maybe that wasn't that effective. Um, there also, in thinking about Cold War, you have you have the idea of like mutually assured destruction from the development of the atomic bomb. I don't know. Was that a purposeful thing, or did that just happen? Uh, I don't know how that would be assessed. You'd have to really find a good way um, to describe that. Uh, Now, anti-war movements created international organization and adopted peacemaking policies in order to further peace and avoid future conflicts. The question is this going to is your nonviolent resistance going to get credit for this? Your Gandhi and your Martin Luther King. I don't know about that, because they aren't really doing this. They're not really trying to adopt peacemaking policies. They are using these tactics of peaceful protest to try to gain their political goals within their countries. I don't know if that really falls under the category of adopting peacemaking policies to avoid international conflict. I don't think that's going to get credit. Just my thoughts on it. This is definitely something that would be more on the bigger international organizations. What about the non-aligned movement during the Cold War? Countries like um, India, Indonesia, Pakistan, uh, the African countries that are getting developed, Ghana during the Cold War period, 1950s, 60s into the 70s, they kind of formed together in a way to resist the Cold War entanglements of the United States and the Soviet Union. Those would be things that could potentially be talked about as something that was trying to avoid international conflict, because they don't want to get involved in that. Those are what's jumping out to me on the top of my head with this one. Very doable, very doable when it comes to these LEQs. I think lots of potential things that you could talk about.